Hello, everyone. This is Jim Bergman, and thank you for joining today's session. Today, we're going to cover blended learning solutions. Blended learning is an approach that has taken quite a foot in the overall learning and development industry over the past few years. And we wanted to make sure that you are licensees within the commercial officers group licensee base understands what blended learning is. It is a combination of various content delivery models. The content delivery models could be things such as the classroom sessions that so many of us are familiar with, but it could also include webinars. Those are live webinars that would be broadcast to a group, or it could be the recorded webinars that an individual might look at or review on an as-needed, on-demand basis. There are a number of other formats, such as the interactive online modules, and those are basically used on an on-demand basis. There are simulations that allow the user to become much more interactive and immersed into the content and allow through the technology for them to be much more engaged in the learning experience. There's options such as coaching or mentoring or peer interactions where it's not necessarily going to be based on a computer or in a classroom, but in a one-on-one discussion through either phone calls or emails or face-to-face meetings. There's going to be options where you can go into a library and use the various resources present in the library and allow you to, yes, simply review those documents in the library, as well as start having some interaction with other users of the library to start discussing templates, tools, articles that one might find in the library and create somewhat of a message board post around that given document. There are obviously other content delivery models that can also be brought into that learning solution. But in any event, what we mean by blended is where an individual or an organization decides that one delivery model is not enough. There needs to be a portfolio of options brought together, integrated, that allows that end user, that learner, to be able to learn to the means and approach that best suits their own personal needs and preferences. We see within the blended learning options great amount of integration across those platforms so that the message is reinforced on a consistent basis. We see that there's a number of benefits through blended learning. We find that it is typically very flexible, and it certainly is going to fit to the needs and requirements of the individuals or that learning cohort. So it really becomes somewhat fit for purpose. There's benefits around the tracking of participation, individuals who might only come on to occasion into the material. One can track the number of instances when that has occurred. There's ways in which we can track whether or not they have completed a module, whether they have taken a quiz and what the results of the quiz may be. The buttons that you can turn on or off around these attributes are very, and you're able to customize that on your own needs. As an exam, the learner to become much more engaged, much more participative, rather than just passively sitting and listening to a recording, much like you're doing right now with this session, and all we're really doing is conveying information to you rather than dialoguing with you. Obviously, this format has its limitations, but there are benefits. We can distribute this information across a very broad base of individuals. We can record it, you can use it on demand, you can replay it, you can share it with your colleagues. However, we within Commercial Officers Group don't have a clue as to whether or not you're learning anything from this specific session. We hope you are, but we cannot have that assurance. And in many instances, the learning and development organizations in an enterprise such as yours will expect you to be able to demonstrate that you've created a certain level of mastery for yourself around the content. The quizzes and the exams are an excellent way of proving that you in fact have learned something. And that learning needs to be basically built upon. We can show through skills assessments and other mechanisms such as that where your gaps exist and whether or not you're learning material that helps close those gaps. There are certification programs that can be created. We within Commercial Officers Group have the Commercial Project Management program that leads to certification. It's an excellent means of giving somebody a motivation towards the end of their journey to get a set of letters that they can apply to the end of their name and to demonstrate that they have attained the requisite level of mastery around that content, and they then can demonstrate to their internal stakeholders, to their senior management, that they have elevated themselves within the body of knowledge to having an extra level, a heightened level of understanding. We want to make sure that an individual as well as the holders that they are serving are benefiting from the time invested. And by creating quizzes and exams and certifications, it allows that individual and those who are sponsoring them to realize the maximum benefit from that time and effort, monetary investment as well, into the program. So when it comes to blended learning, we have to ask ourselves, how exactly does that work? We want to take a little peek under the hood, if you will, to understand the approach that is necessary. And the approach can be one of two primary directions, and it can be somewhere a middle ground between these two. It can be simply a portfolio of learning resources, and that portfolio of learning resources can be made available on a shared folder, on a website, an internal website. It might be an internal page that your organization has created, and say you work for XYZ company. It might be a page where we're just loading up links and you can then click those links and watch a webinar or access a document. Or it might be much more integrated and cohesive into what we call a learning management system, or LMS. There are specific LMS software packages out there that allow licensee to go and populate the LMS system with the various modules, to integrate in that skills assessment, to be able to track the progress of the learners through that system. And so it can be relatively simple, such as the portfolio of resources, or it can be a much more integrated, deliberate approach by using an LMS system. That is certainly up to you and your organization as to whether, when you go into a blended approach, whether you're going to make it somewhat more informal and just have a portfolio of resources, or a more formal approach. If you only have a few people, if you only have a few resources, perhaps all you need is a website, that internal website, or a shared folder that people can go to. But if you're investing a lot more into this endeavor and you've got a lot more people and resources invested, then we within Commercial Officers Group would suggest and encourage you to go and explore the options around these various LMSs. The content can be from within your own organization or externally. Requirements need to be defined up front, and that's how you would get started, is ask yourself, what do we really want this program to be? And once you've defined the requirements of what are the skills that you're trying to develop, what is the subject matter, what is the content, you can then basically assess whether the audience or the users, those students, if you will, the learners, whether or not they have the requisite level of content already at their disposal, whether they've got knowledge, that capability or competency, I should say, around that material. And once they do have that assessment conducted for themselves, we can then figure out whether there's a gap. And we can figure whether the gap to be closed is best served through a customized program or a standard program, or perhaps a hybrid. And with a hybrid, what we would have would be some material, some of the modules, some of the content is going to be unique and customized to your own organization. It may be proprietary to your own organization, and it is only really relevant to your own internal team. You can integrate in also the standard, sort of off-the-shelf, available on the marketplace type of content. And this is where blended also is an advantage, because it gives you the best of both worlds. It allows you the specific content customized to your own organization, but it also gives you access to the material, the body of knowledge that all other practitioners across the globe, across the industry are utilizing. And so that hybrid approach many times is the most attractive. But as we said, key step number one is define your requirements. You could basically, in a requirements definition paper, identify what are the platforms that are available and which platform suits you best. What is the content that you're going to want to load into that platform? Who are the teachers, the subject matter experts, those who are going to be delivering? It could be internal individuals or external. Again, you want to make sure that there is most appropriate fit to the learning needs with that learning group. And then we also encourage you, as part of your requirements, what the overall internal marketing needs are going to be in order to, once you have that program established, make it understood and visible, make it attractive, make it desirable, draw people to it in order to use that learning program. We find, unfortunately, too many times where the client, the organization who's putting together their blended learning program, that they've done an excellent job of identifying the platform. They've made the modules look really good. They've got some great learners, some great teachers, some great content, that it's all put together, and yet it's just sitting there underutilized. They create this opportunity, and yet maybe 5–10% of the learners actually come to it. Or when they do, those learners come to it, they might only use a few modules within the portfolio. And that's really obviously unfortunate, but we have to ask ourselves, have we, as the creator of this blended learning program, have we done a good job of marketing it to our clients, our internal clients, to our audience, to those learners? And so we encourage you, as you give some thought to whether or not you want to put together a blended learning program and roll it out to your organizations. First off, decide whether you're going to take a make or buy approach to this. Are you going to create it yourself? Or are you basically going to bring in an external resource to do it for you? Or perhaps you could do a blended of the blended, and that is that hybrid, where some of it you make yourself, some of it you're going to buy from the market. You're going to use an external resource on these pieces, but we're going to use internal resources on those pieces. But have a deliberate plan of which materials will be internal, which materials will be external. We also encourage you, as you create your blended learning program, to start small. Don't try to create the entire program that's going to cure all of the problems and needs of the entire enterprise and hold back until the entire program is fully available. We encourage you to somewhat beta test pieces and portions of it, making sure that the material is resonating with your audiences, that those materials are effective, that they're creating the impact that you desire. And if they are, then continue to grow it. If they're not, then figure out why you're falling short. Make the corrective actions that are necessary. Create that continuous improvement, the feedback loops, to make sure that you've got the right amount of material, the right caliber material, the right program, and that it is then resonating with that audience. We also encourage you, before you go out and get a bunch of materials to put together, create that shopping list, if you will, before you do the actual shopping. Make sure that the materials, the content, the resources that you're pulling together are somewhat of a deliberate use, rather than you've on an ad hoc basis collected materials and you're dumping those materials into a common repository. Having an overall message that you're trying to somewhat impart onto your audience is going to be of great importance. We encourage you to be flexible as you continue to grow your program. Look at what other options might be available, other content. Sometimes some of the material you've put into the program isn't really relevant. It's not worthwhile. Delete it out if that's the case. Make this somewhat of an ongoing, ever-growing, evolving type of solution, rather than making it static. Material gets stale pretty quick. Some of the material you'll find isn't really that useful. And recognize that up front and pull it out. Because just think of this, and it goes back to the marketing piece. If you bring a new learner to that portfolio and the first item, the first module they look at is not so desirable to them, then they're going to basically say the entire program is of that caliber. And you will get a disinterested stakeholder, and they will go around the organization saying, yeah, I looked at the material, it wasn't all that good. Well, all they did was look at one piece of the overall program, and now they're giving, somewhat of a thumbs down message to other learners, and they will be driving away learners who need to be coming to the program. So we encourage you, if you have some really good content, make sure it gets high visibility. If you have some not so good content, perhaps revise it or delete it out of the program. Overall, the learning needs are going to change and evolve. And for instance, COVID-19, recent evolution in our overall approach. Force majeure is going to be a very important issue within our learning program. So what are you doing to create a module around COVID-19? Perhaps this is something that you would want to create for yourselves, as it's very relevant to your own organization, or perhaps there's some material out in the marketplace that is highly relevant and useful. And so do not have a set approach, have at least a direction you're going to go, somewhat of a footprint you're going to occupy, but don't ignore and prematurely eliminate material from your program just because it doesn't initially fit your scope. That scope, I'm not saying should creep, but it should evolve and include material and content into the program as needed. I would also encourage you to define how you're going to measure success, what the overall impact, positive, or it might be negative, hopefully not, but the positive impact that you're going to have with this learning program. We used to, in the good old days, basically say, well, classroom sessions, and what was the measure of success? And unfortunately, in many instances, the measure of success was we have 100 people on staff and 98 of them have gone and sat in the classroom. And they felt that that was a measure of success. Unfortunately, it's not. Of the 100 people who sat in the classroom, how many of them learned something? Well, that's not a good enough ROI, a measure of success, and it doesn't demonstrate the ROI. Of the 100 people who sat in the classroom, how many of them have been able to improve the skills and understanding that they need around that subject matter? That's a better measure of success, but it's not great yet. We would want the tell, show, do approach to come into play through this managed approach around blended learning, where one would say, well, I initially had less than attractive capability. I've been now able to improve my capability and competency. I've applied the lessons to a project, And as a result of me applying the lessons to a project, I was able to deliver X number of dollars of value to the organization directly because of what I've learned in that program. That increasingly is the measure of success that organizations are trying to track. We encourage you as a next step to ask yourself whether blended learning approach is effective to you and you think would be viable within your organization. And if so, create that blended portfolio for to your internal holders. We encourage you, if you have questions about this, to reach out to us. We have, as a on an ongoing basis, over 100 webinars, live webinars coming up within the Commercial Officers Group portfolio that you could bring in as part of that broader portfolio that you're trying to create. It's part of your license to Commercial Officers Group. There are a number of recordings, various other tools, templates within the library. We encourage you to find ways of integrating those materials as you see appropriate and when appropriate into your content. If you have questions around this, please come to our website and let us know. You can reach me at my email address of jbergman@commercialofficers.com. And if you have any questions of how to put this together, how to create a blended learning program, we'd be more than happy to give you some guidance and coach you through this. So don't hesitate to come to us and ask us how to put this together for yourselves. Blending learning is certainly the approach that we see is the direction that people are embracing. It's proving itself to be the more effective approach rather than having a singular, classroom mentality or purely a webinar mentality. It is a portfolio approach. And by having that portfolio approach, we're seeing that our licensees are able to deliver much greater impact to their commercial contracting, their commercial project management, their commercial relationship management disciplines, and being able to generate much higher yields on their overall contracts. So feel free to reach out to us if and when you need to, and we look forward to having that discussion. Hopefully this was of value to you today, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate in letting us know. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.